So for this video, I thought I would go through and talk a little bit about some books that I've read over the years. I got into this library thing website. I like it a little bit more than Goodreads. Maybe because I like the reviews, I find them more trustworthy, or because I don't read as much popular fiction. So I also like that it's kind of got this old school internet layout to it where you can set up your profile and all that good stuff. And it's also really good for looking up books in the public library for Dewey Decimal System. So this is my profile, and I'm just going to go through some of these. This first book is Papyrus. It's about the Library of Alexandria and basically the invention of writing, the invention of books in the ancient world. Fantastic book, huge nonfiction book. See, it gives you the Dewey Decimal and the Library of Congress call numbers there. All right, so these are some books that I've read over the years. We got Meditations, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, famous medieval epic poem, Dostoevsky, Jules Verne, Bernal Diaz. I've been long into these primary source histories. Edward Abbey, Desert Solitaire, about his time working at Arches National Park when it was still this was a national monument back then in the late 50s when he first worked there. Letters of Abelard and Eloise, Education of Henry Adams, maybe the best autobiography of an American I don't know, 1920 or something. A book by the Argentine novella writer Cesar Ira, Alberti on painting as an art history major, former art history major, I should say, many years ago. Dante's memoir of why he chose to use the vernacular as opposed to Latin, the Tuscan language. Divine Comedy, Sherwood Anderson, W.H. Auden poems. I've always been a W.H. Auden fan. St. Augustine, City of God, Confessions, Paul Auster, Leviathan. This is about a guy who kind of was a former Weather Underground, and the narrator, Paul Auster's character. This is probably my favorite Paul Auster novel, actually. Got the New York trilogy here as well. Balzac, Lost Illusions. Head over to the next page. A couple of books by Rainer Banham. Most famous one, LA, The Architecture of Four Ecologies. Somebody who's lived in LA for a long time. I was even reading this book before I first moved out here. Jacques Barzun, From Dawn to Decadence. He wrote books about academia, books about writing, books about research. This is probably a great place to start, even though it was near the end of his life. Breaks down every single period of European history from early modern, basically through the 20th century. Jean Baudrillard, Simulacra Simulation, influenced The Matrix, talks a lot about Disneyland, and there's a lot of application in terms of lifestyle shopping centers and stuff like that. Another art history book by Michael Baxendall, well-known art historian. I'm a fan of Native American literature. The Sun Bear Medicine Wheel. This is kind of a new age 70s, 80s book, I think. Waiting for Godot. A book by Mario Benedetti, the Uruguayan author. Really good book. Has never been translated into English. A couple of books by Walter Benjamin. John Berger, Ways of Seeing, famous art history book. Isak Dinesen, Out of Africa. Harold Bloom, Western Canon. I had actually transcribed Harold Bloom's full Western Canon list. Yes, I am that much of a nerd. Genius, another Harold Bloom book. Boethius, Constellation of Philosophy, which is often referred to by Ignatius Riley and Confederacy of Dunces. Now we got a couple newer things. Well, several Bolaño books, 2666, By Night in Chile, Distant Star, Last Evenings on Earth, and The Savage Detectives. Savage Detectives would be my favorite. It's the first book that I ever read by Bolaño. Completely devoured it the first time I read it. Coming through to the next page, a couple more Bolaño Antwerp, which is a collection of short vignettes. I don't know if I would even call it flash fiction. It's very esoteric. Woes of the True Policeman, which features his character Amalfitano. A couple books by Daniel Borstein, who used to be the Librarian of Congress, The Discoverers and the Creators. A couple books by Borges. One of my favorite historians, Ferdinand Braudel, was a social historian in the 50s. I believe he was part of the Analytic School. His most famous is the Mediterranean and the world of in the age of Philip II, very famous. Brautigan's one of my favorite writers. I got a bunch of Brautigan books up here. Confederate General, Rommel Drives Deep into Egypt, which is poetry. Hawkline Monster, a Gothic Western. Willard and his bowling trophies. If you're going to read Brautigan, you start with these three. You start with Trout Fishing, Confederate General, and then Watermelon Sugar. I like some of his lesser known books from the late 70s, early 80s, which weren't very popular at the time, but Willard and the Bowling Trophies, very funny. Sombrero Fallout, also great. One of my favorites, Dreaming of Babylon, is probably my favorite of the lesser known Brautigans, I should say. So probably my two favorite Brautigans are In Watermelon Sugar and Dreaming of Babylon. We got Bronte, Wuthering Heights. On to the next page. Bill Bryson, Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid. Great story about growing up in the 50s, growing up in Iowa, middle America. Hugh Bukowski, Post Office. Probably my favorite, Hollywood, about the adaptation of Barfly and after he became famous. Ham on Rye, about his story growing up. A couple books by Chicano writer Burciaga, Drink Culture and Spilling the Beans. Jacob Burckhardt, famous art historian German from the late 1800s, Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy. Still a great read. Junkie, William S. Burroughs, and the Hippos Were Boiled in Their Tanks, which he wrote with Kerouac. Calvino, Elizabeth City, Sprague de Camp, Ancient Engineers about the pyramids. I like dated Egyptian books. I don't know why, if the information's out of date. I still like the way that they are put together. Joseph Campbell, of course, Power of Myth, which is his dialogue with Bill Moyers, I believe. And then the famous Hero with a Thousand Faces, which influenced Star Wars, George Lucas, among other writers. Very famous book for Hollywood writers and actors. Camus, The Fall, Capote, Breakfast at Tiffany, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends, Raymond Carver, Carlos Castaneda. He's somebody who's somewhat polarizing. Catullus, probably my favorite Roman poet. Don Quixote, Wonder Boys by Michael Chabon, which was adapted into the movie. Bob Dylan won the Best Oscar song for Things Have Changed. Raymond Chandler, Big Sleep, Canterbury Tales, Cheever, some Chekhov, a big history, famous big history book by David Christian, one of the more well known of the newer big history books. Civilization, Kenneth Clark, the BBC series that he did of the same name is absolutely fantastic. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Paulo Coelho, Conrad, Cortázar, Blow Up, Hopscotch, which is one of my favorite books. Nature's Metropolis, which is a great book about 1800s America and the founding of Chicago. Roald Dahl, Charlie and Chocolate Factory. Roald Dahl was probably my favorite writer as a child. Don DeLillo, The Names. It's a fun Mediterranean story. Jared Diamond, Joan Didion played as Lays. Joan Didion, Year of Magical Thinking, a book about grief. John Donne, famous metaphysical poet. White Knights, Dostoevsky. I've seen the film adaptation as well. Books that changed the world, which this was a book that I read in high school that got me interested in different works of literature, comparative literature, historical works. Sherlock Holmes, always a classic. History of Private Life by George Duby. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Duby. One of my favorite social histories. Umberto Eco, Name of the Rose, Dave Eggers, Black Elk Speaks. A couple books by John Fonte, Ask the Dust being the most famous. Wait Until Spring Bandini is also great. Fitzgerald, which was probably This Side of Paradise, probably my favorite book when I was, I don't know, 18, 19 years old when I first read it. It's a great story to read while in college because it's about college. Foucault, Order of Things, Magus, John Fowles, another great Mediterranean story, and Frank. Closing of the Western Mind, a book about urban design of Florence. William Gaddis, The Recognitions, about an art forger in the 1930s, inspired by a true story. Eduardo Galeano, Open Veins of Latin America, a must read book along the lines of Howard Zinn. This was famously the book that Chavez had given to Obama in 2009 at the America Summit. Days and Nights of Love and War, which is one of my favorite. Galeano, Soccer and Sun and Shadow, also fantastic. Sayonara Home Run, Art of the Japanese Baseball Card, a fun book. I think it's a Chronicle Books. 100 Years of Solitude, Edward Gibbon, a book about Middle Ages. Young Werther. Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. This is a fun read. Gets a really good resale price on Amazon. I actually have resold a copy of this, probably got 40 or $50 off of it. Lord of the Flies, Gombrich, Story of Art, Famous Art Historical Survey, Doris Kearns Goodwin, Dawn of Everything, 48 Laws of Power. Yeah, I'm guilty of reading that. Inside South America. John Gunther did these Inside series from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Inside USA, I believe, is from 1947. It's an absolute must read. Good Soldier Schweck, one of the all time funny books. You got to read it to believe it. The stories are just so hilarious and bawdy in that. David Halberstam, Summer of 49. I was a big baseball nut when I was a kid. Breaks of the Game about the Trailblazers, also by Halberstam, when they won the championship with Walton and the years afterwards as the team was breaking apart. Independent People about the survival of individuals in Iceland. Federalist Papers, Knut Hamsun, Growth of the Soil and Hunger, his most well-known book. Art of Fielding, Chad Harbach. Frederick Hart, another art historical survey. This was the survey textbook that I read in college. I think that they're still using it. They must be on the, I don't know, sixth edition by now. A Latin American history book. It's a difficult read. It's a very bloody history. The social history of art, along with the history of private life, probably my two favorite social histories, along with Braudel. Hayek, Road to Serfdom, Beowulf, Seamus Heaney translation, Heidegger, Catch 22, some Hemingway. Sun Also Rises, Hesse, book about New Mexico. Go, which was probably the first beat novel that features Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg as characters in it, different names, of course. High Fidelity, Nick Hornby, Fun Easy Read, Kite Runner, Elementary Particles by Holdenbeck. I haven't read any other of his books, but I did enjoy this. Best Loser Wins about stock trading. The Autumn of the Middle Ages, famous social history book as well. Brave New World, Huysmans, Ionesco. I've read several books by Ishiguro. Probably my favorite is Never Let Me Go, but The Unconsoled is very underrated, worth a read. Jane Jacobs, as a fan of urbanism, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. This was one of her late books, Dark Age Ahead, that she wrote kind of against the W administration in Iraq. Ken Jennings' book about maps, fun read. Elements of Style, always refer to this. Kafka, Silence in the Age of Noise, which is a sort of memoir of this guy who is an adventurer. Very interesting book. A book about Murakami and his translators, which was really nice. A couple of books by Kerouac, Kierkegaard. I read most of my struggle books. Nausgard. The book one is the one that always gets a lot of attention. I think book two has some really great moments. Book three, which was about boyhood, I'm not quite as much of a fan of. Book four, where he teaches in the north of Norway for a year, I thought this one was great. And book five, so I'd say that my favorite Nausgards, I only got through a little bit of book six. I'd say that my favorite Nausgards are two, four, and one, probably in that order. A Separate Piece, Kundera, Book of Laughter and Forgiving. Big fan of Par Lagervist. Nobody really seems to talk about him. The Sybil, the way that he takes historical time periods and blends them with timeless themes is really fantastic. The Barabbas book is great. I'm a big fan of D.H. Lawrence, big fan of his travel writings. Sons and Lovers is a great novel. Heavy by Kiese Lehman, great memoir. Sign of the Flying Goose about national wildlife refuges. Thomas Mallory, Death in Venice. I haven't read any other Javier Marias, but A Heart So White was great. The Spoon River Anthology, also good. Guy de Maupassant, Fellow Me. I'm just going to end it here for right now. We'll pick up with Stephen Millhauser, but this gives you an idea of some of the books that I've read over the years.